I think we're ready to start. So if we're all happy, we're going to kick off. And so welcome everyone from wherever you are in the world. It's really exciting to have you all here. I know yes, for example, I think it is an anniversary today. So there's various people's birthdays and all sorts of things that people are doing. So, we're really pleased that you guys are taking some time out to join us. Just a quick background to this event. So a number of us who can wave now all started this event just because we felt that it was, we've all had really, really difficult time since March and early for some of you. And so we were trying to put together an event that was all about just getting people together because we thought, why not? And so it's a kind of a freestyle event, really just looking at how we can, as a non-profit, just group of merry people who thought this would be cool. And we spent the last couple of weeks, working on various bits of this, all around the clock, just to try and make it happen for you all. And we're really, really delighted to have as many people on here as possible. And of course, I've mentioned her before, but personally, it's nice for my mother to join me as well. So selfishly, I'm going to go shout out to my mum, Trish Mensah, who's on the call, who I've not seen since March. So hello, mum, I'm still all right. And I will respond to your emails at some point eventually. Sorry, mother. You do matter now, but I've just been busy. And so, for us all in the world, it's, starting off with the fact that it's all about us as a community. And by community, I mean just people who are interested, in supporting each other, no matter where we are. Staying healthy in difficult times of the economy, and right now more than ever looking at getting justice, having justice, for everyone. It feels like what matters now has come along at a really timely matter for us all. And so the format for today is just to do a series of 5-minute talks and performances. Some of them are live, and a few of them are pre-recorded. And it's just on the topic of what matters now for the speakers. And at any point, it'd be great if people would like to contribute to what matters now to them by just putting in the chat if you're able to. And so, those of us who are thinking about creating, making, thinking, caring for each other at this time, this is what this event's about. Feel free to drop in, and out. It's going to last for approximately 2 hours, and then we've got a little period at the end where we can just all relax and chat to each other. So we've got 18 speakers. 5 minutes each, and in terms of the community, we've got Lauren, who's supporting us in terms of the community and code of conduct, and then we've got myself, Mike, and Jasper also here to support you, as well as Jane, Larissa, Nick, and others as well. So just wanted to say thank you for being here. As usual with Zoom, if Zoom's your first time Zooming, please do mute your microphone throughout. And we may use breakout rooms as well, which we'll explain later on for little sessions in between. And so please primarily do use the chat feature. And it's going to be broken into 3 acts. And that's going to allow us to split up this kind of the themes. So I hope that fits with you. Of course, Sebastiaan doing music and DJing throughout. As I mentioned, and Jasper and Mike stage managing, and Katie is live tweeting for us. So Katie, thank you for joining us to do that. And we're recording each session. I'm gonna put them online at some point too. So all that being said, really pleased you're all here. As I say, from the bottom of our heart, we spent the last couple of weeks just really hoping that we get a few people, on here. And it's great to have so many people taking this time. So I know I've said that before, but it really is a delight for us. And I'm really, really excited to have you all here with us. So thank you all. So that being said, it's time to move on to our first speaker, who's going to kick things off. His name's Philip Walker. So I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to Phil. I know Phil's ready. Firstly, it's not on the script, but Phil and I have worked together for a number of years, and so it's a great privilege to introduce a friend and colleague. So Phil is joining us from England, Bristol, which is the greatest city on earth and located in the southwest of England. Phil's worked in the cultural sector for over 25 years and was initially an artist working in video and performance and installations, and is currently the head of cultural services in Gloucester, and has curated a number of exhibitions and created programs in the past, including a small artist that some of you may have heard of called Banksy, who's at Bristol with the Banksy versus Bristol Museum exhibition, which attracted over 300,000 people. And he was part of the project team to develop the award-winning Shed Museum in Bristol, which has over 700,000 visitors a year. Phil's constantly engaging in navigating extremes and trying to make a difference by connecting people with meaningful cultural experiences. Phil's presentation is called Extremes and How to Survive the 2020s. So Phil, if you're ready, please kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, as Zach said, navigating extremes. I'm going to start off with fairly extreme binge watching that I did at the start of lockdown. So introducing Joe Exotic, the Tiger King. Many of you will have come across Joe and his love interest and a story of passion, a Romeo and Juliet style show, love, lust, tigers, and even murder. Carol Baskin, his love interest, maybe she gets the upper hand. Did she feed her husband to the tigers? Who knows? You decide. So my first tip is avoid tigers at all costs. As a way of survival, perhaps Netflix subscription might be good. I don't work for Netflix, but I'm just putting it out there. Join 25 million other people who signed up in lockdown. They now have something like 200 million subscribers worldwide. So either subscribe or buy some shares because they're going somewhere. But more seriously, the original Tiger King is King George V. And in 1911, King George went on a hunting expedition where something like 66 tigers were shot, a dozen rhinos, numerous other beautiful animals. And this was all in the name of trophy hunting. And where do these trophies end up? They end up in museums like Bristol Museum and Art Gallery. This one is in a beautiful vitrine case. And not long ago, we were challenged by some young people, part of the climate change movement, saying, well, what are you doing about the stories that these tigers and other animals are undergoing through habitat loss and trophy hunting? So we changed the displays radically by shrouding all the endangered animals, which was one way of taking some kind of action and highlighting the risks around that. So in a museum context, it was nice to be able to respond, and museums should always attempt to be relevant and expose those hidden stories. So that's my second tip, is expose those stories, those hidden stories. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, and you'll be well aware of another protest, Black Lives Matter protest, which forced this the issue of Colston, Edward Colston, the slaver, who was toppled as part when that protest was in Bristol. He was rolled into the docks. Banksy just proposed a way of commemorating this through memorializing the protesters, which I thought was a nice response. And it's led to other things, strange, bizarre things. So a pub which was called Colston Arms after the same traders had to rename itself. So Ye Olde Pubby McDrunkface is the temporary name of the Colston Arms. So tip 2, take action, do something, anything. So talking of pubs, one of the things I did in lockdown was build a pub in my shed in my bottom of my garden. The Newfound Out is my local pub, and now the Newfound Inn was my lockdown pub, which I went to on a Friday, Saturday night. Millions of others did more creative things than that. They built saunas, they did all sorts. I learned to bake bread, so learn to bake bread. Other people I've heard of learning to speak Latin or Japanese or whatever it is. My daughter made some clappers, did creative things, and we all tried to learn something new. So that's my 5th tip. Put your hands up if you tried and failed to homeschool effectively. Absolute disaster. I couldn't do it. My daughter did better than I did, but anyway, hopefully she'll be all right. We'll get through this. I took part for about one or two sessions of Joe Wicks. Could I keep up? No. Joe Wicks was the fitness instructor that kept us all going. So tip 6, keep active. I'm moving quickly because I've got too many slides, but we also had extremes in case of weather. So from the climate change, we've had extreme weather, wettest weather, and the nicest spring. Were we able to go there? No. So what did we do? We broke the lockdown. We went to Bournemouth Beach in our millions, or thousands anyway. So tip 7, don't add to the mayhem. Political extremes happening. Could it come any stranger? Or is Kanye West going to be the next president? Who knows? What's Boris got to say? Build. That's his way out of this. I don't know if that's the solution, but my tip is here is vote. Use your vote. Aristotle, philosopher, said had a theory of eudaimonia, which is about balance. So perhaps all of this is about balance. So my way of is taking inspiration from a philosopher, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, who gets us out on a Friday night, and her tip is about dancing. So if you're not able to go and enjoy the music the tickets, which I was going to go to next Wednesday for Nile Rodgers, unfortunately, instead, I'm just going to have to dance with you guys. So that's it for me. I'm going to take you out with a bit of Nile Rodgers. Thank you. Come on, dance, everybody.
Thank you very much, Phil.
That's it.
Everyone claps from everyone. So on behalf of everyone, thank you, Phil, for your rapid response to what matters now, and a whistle-stop tour. So thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to time as well. That was really, really cool. So thank you very much for that, Phil. Right, okay. So moving swiftly on to our next speaker is Sarah. Sarah Posner is the author of the new book, Why White Evangelists Worship at the Altar of Donald Trump. She's a reporting fellow at Type Investigations, and her work has appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, The Guardian, The National, The New Republic, HuffPost, and many more. Sarah is joining us today from Washington, D.C., and her talk is titled Investigative Journalism During Rising Authoritarianism. So Sarah, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you to Mike for asking me to do this. We went back and forth on what the title should be, but I felt that given the context, it was important to me to talk about the values of journalism and investigative journalism in particular, when reporters around the world are not only faced with physical violence and persecution and oppression and jail, but also that journalists have to contend with that kind of hostility on top of being lied to and gaslit. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the process that went into my book and how I came to report this book in the midst of a book about rising authoritarianism in the context of rising authoritarianism. So as Zach mentioned, this is the book. It's called Unholy: Why White Evangelicals Worship at the Altar of Donald Trump. And I've been reporting about the Christian right in the United States for many, many, many years. It dates back to the time when I first met Mike and Leslie when we were in college together. And my reporting started with how evangelicals, white evangelicals, who had for many, many years professed wanting a president who was a Christian, who was a family man, who was pious, who was committed to their values, would fall for Donald Trump. And at the same time, as I was reporting on that during the 2016 primary campaign, I was also reporting on how Trump was energizing and electrifying white supremacists with his racist and nativist rallies, with his use of social media, which amplified racist and white supremacist Twitter feeds, and how at the same time that he was electrifying these white supremacists, he was also enthralling evangelicals, Christian nationalist people who believe that America was founded as a Christian nation and should be restored to being a Christian nation after what they see as what they would call social engineering of secularism and the civil rights movement and women's rights and reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights. So a through line of the book is how these two wings of the American right ended up in coalition in support of Donald Trump, and that this was happening alongside and as part of rising right-wing authoritarianism around the world. And the through line of my book is how both of these wings of the American right share a hostility towards liberal democratic values, towards the notion of a society which is based on the institutions of a liberal democracy, including a free press, an independent judiciary, an executive that can be checked by a legislative branch, the separation of powers, and a government that protects the civil and human rights and dignity of everyone, all of its citizens, regardless of their status or sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, and so forth. And so what we have right now is Trump continuing to hold on to this base, doubling down in the midst of our twin pandemics here, COVID and systemic racism, doubling down on all of this. And so we're facing a lot of threats to our democracy here in the United States, a lot of which center around not just Trump, but the coalition that he's built with its hostility to, like I said, the values and institutions of a liberal democracy. And so as we get closer to the election, it's important to understand how Trump and his coalition work in tandem with each other to sow division within our society, to cause people to question what the truth is, to cause people to question what is at stake in the election, what is happening in the election, what is happening with the pandemic and Trump's role in it. And so I see my 5 minutes are almost up, but I want to thank everybody for letting me participate in this event. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else is performing and has to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation there. And I look forward to reading your book in due course, and add it to the pile for this year. So thank you very much for that. So the next speaker is going to be Leslie. So Leslie, hopefully you're ready. Leslie comes to us from Falls Church, VA, just outside Washington, DC in the United States. Leslie is a parent, teacher, writer, and musician. She studied at Wesleyan University in Connecticut and at the University of Michigan. Her notable positions include cook at the legendary Del Rio Bar in Ann Arbor, general and editorial assistant at the Smithsonian Folkways Records, and production associate for the Folk Masters concert and radio series. Her first novel, Seeking the Center, is about sort of the multiple meanings of ice hockey. And her second book, still in progress, is set on the west coast of Sweden during Viking times. I think by the end of this, we're going to have quite a lot of book recommendations for us all to read over the next coming months. Leslie is a folklorist wannabe and an archaeologist wannabe, and is interested also in the traditional identity and cultural expressions of all kinds, and that includes ice hockey. Leslie loves textiles and oral histories, rocks, wildflowers, the ocean, and heading north, which is interesting. I'm not sure what heading north meant, Leslie. I should have checked for you before. And also loves a good groove. So Leslie will read her poem, The Dead, A Stream of Consciousness. So Leslie, when you're ready.
Thank you, Zach. Just for context, I want to say a couple things about my piece. I wish that I could make words as instantaneously descriptive as images, which of course they could never be. But words are what I've got, so you can fill in the blanks. This piece consists of words that I've been experimenting with during the ongoing protests against police brutality following the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. The words are inspired by the righteousness and manifold beauties of the protesters and by their courage, strong against the backdrops of a global pandemic and continuing state-sanctioned, state-sponsored violence against people of color. I want to remember those who've died during this dark time and those who live on, hoping and working and fighting for a future time of light. I wish for us to be in solidarity and to share strength with one another. The title of the piece is The Dead, a Stream of Consciousness. A body, a person, a breath, a thought, a gesture, a footprint, a platform, a plot, a story, a yarn, a thread, a tweet, a status, a statement, a judgment, a seat, a lecture, a poem, a painting, a play, an hour, a minute, a decade, a day, a bio, a CV, a profile, a pic, an Insta, an address, a number, a shtick, a club, a cocktail, a dish, a dance, a mission, a vision, a dream, a trance, a hairdo, a piercing, a color, a style, a ribbon, a rainbow, a mask, a smile, a move, a groove, a drum beat, a lick, a pop song, a playlist, a soundtrack, a flick, a hit, a catch, a toss, a spin, a slide, a jump, a shot, a win, a loss, a gloss, a goal, a glitch, a moonshot, a spaceship, a goddess, a witch, a worker, a waiter, a lover, a bloke, a pinch, a sip, a smoke, a joke, a dust-up, a quarrel, a quibble, a quark, an atom, an axle, a road trip, a lark, a wing, a wave, a course, a flow, a stutter, a stagger, a glissade, a go, a try, a cry, a sickness, a curse, a witness, a rising, a vigil, a verse, a call, a response, an ally, a friend, a placard, a promise, a march, a demand, an arc, a struggle, a portent, a plea, a planet, a people, a fist, a knee. Thank you.
Leslie, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thanks, Zach.
I realize I'm probably clapping on behalf of all 70 plus people. So Leslie, this is the most thunderous clap I can do for you. So that was.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Great. So, moving on to our next speaker is Tory. So Tory is from Evansville, Indiana in the United States. And Tory is the Virginia G. Schroeder Curator of Art at Evansville Museum of Arts, History and Science. And she oversees a 15,000 square foot of exhibition space and is responsible for over 20,000 permanent collection objects, ranging from prehistory to modernity. Tory works with the community on exhibitions and program development by seeking guidance on cultural and sharing authorship when writing exhibitions. Tory's talk is titled Collecting in the Now. So when you're ready, Tory, over to you.
All right, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate this opportunity. So for Collecting in the Now, as noted before that, I'm the Virginia G. Schroeder Curator of Art. And if we can go to the next slide, there's my bio if anyone is interested in looking at it later. But here is a question for the collective. How can we interpret an invisible enemy? As a 21st century curator, it is our job to collect history in the making. The coronavirus, or COVID-19, is a global pandemic that unexpectedly impacted our communities. With the closures of non-essential businesses, schools, and universities, almost every state in the Union and many countries abroad has issued a stay-at-home order instructing residents to shelter in place and self-quarantine. What does this mean? What does this look like? How is our community coping? These are some of the questions circulating around our community as we collectively try to conceptualize what was occurring. Like most of you, I have never dealt with a pandemic. However, in 2018, I had the opportunity to learn about crisis collecting during my training at Johns Hopkins University. Crisis collecting, when the museum takes initiative to document history in the making, has become increasingly important in the past decade. The Boston bombing marathon, 9/11, and the Miami Pulse shooting and other tragedies are a few examples in which our colleagues collected materials and stories to create exhibitions for reflection, memorializing, and to better understand what occurred. From our colleagues, we have toolkits that museum professionals can use in case a crisis hits our community. While we have these tools, it is hard to compare COVID-19 to these types of tragedies. Since COVID-19 is a virus and the public health response has been to close most physical businesses and cultural organizations, museums cannot yet collect any physical memorials like the crises listed above. Also, there is a fear that any objects we might want to collect could be contaminated themselves and would need isolation or special treatment before they could even be handled. And even if we could collect physical objects, they could not be seen in person by anyone since museums are mostly closed. Due to this, we must utilize multimedia platforms, at least for now. During the first week of isolation, my art department started an online campaign to collect pictures and testimonies of people living in quarantine through Facebook, Instagram, and emails. As interest grew, I included phone calls and text messages for accessibility purposes. The idea was to have pictorial testimonies, but as the exhibition grew, people cross-country and internationally submitted content. As the responses poured in, it was both touching and enlightening to learn how people were coping. From the newly unemployed to high-risk individuals, whether they have autoimmune disease or in the 50-plus age group, and even some lucky enough to feel relatively unaffected, these responses and images have been digitized through the creative lens of local artist Joycelyn Tedesco. The testimonies and corresponding pictures were put on steel gray backgrounds, and the color of steel gray was chosen because it represents self-sufficiency and isolation. What is a better way to represent our current situation? One can visit the online exhibition at emuseum.org. And in the remaining 2 minutes, I'd rather be more transparent of what this experience was like, why you should collect, and things to consider if you're going to move forward with this type of collecting as an institution. For the environment, like I noted in the presentation, we can't physically go out and collect things because of that fear of having the virus on it. There's still so much we just don't know. Luckily, I was fortunate enough, though, to build partnerships with local community members, and we were able to receive isolation gowns and masks that have been quarantined and will be on display for our physical exhibition, which will happen in September 20th, because our public noted they wanted an exhibition to understand what this is, intangible objects. And luckily, we actually received full underwriting for this exhibition. Therefore, thus proving the point that when you listen to your community, it matters, and that you can actually have something materialize that is fully funded. Because for museums, we have to be cognizant of the financial ramifications, especially more so now. When it comes to the actual physical collecting, I did an AAM presentation about this type of collecting, and I really want to drive in the point of the emotional expectations that does translate with this type of collecting. It's terrifying because we've never dealt with something like this before. And although we have toolkits to better assess what is going on, when you physically do it, you have to make sure that you have the confidence to go out and do these collections, because you can't slow down momentum even if things aren't coming your way. So you have to be creative when you go about collecting this type of material. Additionally, someone made a comment during a presentation that there is no trauma affected when it comes to the person physically collecting. And I want to dispel that, because while I started this type of collecting, and I only have 10 seconds, while I started to collect these type of materials, I started to connect with colleagues that I only see maybe once or twice a year. And what made it so powerful and emotional is that I learned that a lot of these colleagues that I work with either had COVID or passed of COVID. And that was emotionally hard to process, because out of this entire process, 8 of my colleagues passed away from COVID and 9 more were affected. So you have to be able that you are emotionally prepared to tell this story and continue with it regardless of any ramifications that comes to you, because it is important. Their story deserves to be told and their story deserves to be archived. Thank you.
Tory, thank you very much, Tory, for your wonderful presentation and very humbling as well. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us to do that. So I'm just going to hand over in a second to our next speaker, and then there's a small break into breakout rooms, which I'll explain shortly. So you've got one more speaker, performance actually, and then we'll have our change. So once again, thank you to our speakers up until this point. So let's introduce Merlijn next. Merlijn is a Dutch composer and founder of the Turn Club, a lab for arts and society. He's received a UNESCO award and collaborated with the Kronos Quartet and the New York Philharmonic. He worked in refugee camps and across dividing lines in Cyprus, Palestine, and Syria, involving children, local communities, and professional musicians. Merlijn's performance is titled The Urgent Need of Your Artist Mindset. So Merlijn, if you're ready, humbly hand over to you.
Hey there. Hey, everybody. It's exciting to be here and great to see you all. What matters now? I think we need to really ask the question, what matters less? Because we are men and people who want to make, to build, to produce, to create. And that brought us to a world that's really full of stuff. Too much. So what happens less? And if you ask people who are engaged in social or health issues, they say like, okay, we have too much stress, too much pressure, too much competition, too much workload. If you ask people who are involved in a relationship with the nature and the perspective of the living world, they will say like, okay, we have too much production, too much pollution, too much traffic. And well, this is of course how our whole economy has all this big engine that we have built with all of us. And the big ridiculous thing is that it has been a huge progress, a huge development of what we did as humankind, but we didn't succeed to make this equal for all of us, to become more healthy, to become more happy, actually. And we are in many ways we're stuck. And then we got a pandemic, and that made for many of us our existence much more complex and complicated and stressful and so on. But we also could practice with less. And we could see, of course, well, we have shared a lot of these stories about the opportunities and the time and literally the breath that our living world could take when the human engine was on pause for a while. But of course, this was very painful for a lot of us, especially out of the Western world. You have people who are, well, it's really rough what happens if this whole global economic engine comes to a standstill. So it's very logical that we really desire to go back, that this pandemic is over, we can go back to a world. But that also would be a disaster for the world itself. So I feel we have this huge, huge dilemma at this moment. We want to go back, or we want to go back to normal, but we cannot, we should not do that. Mm-hmm. And then of course I see a lot of voices all around in the news and in the newspapers about sustainability and a Green New Deal, and let's build back better. Of course I agree. But how can we make sure that we actually feel a desire? Not a desire for more stuff and green stuff instead of polluting stuff, because that's just also in this frame of mind that there is so much more and we need more and more and more. No, how can we desire less? How can we actually experience the beauty of less? And I see this as the biggest challenge, to make it desirable, to do less, to produce less. And my question is, can less be beautiful? Can we experience it? Can we play with it? Can we feel it? How it would be to have less income or less stuff or less, well, opportunities maybe. And can we actually imagine it? And then these three things, beauty, play, and imagination. Actually, I'm talking about the toolbox of the artist. And I feel the artist has a lot to contribute, not so much in the products of the artist, not in the performances or the artworks, but in the mindset. Can we make this mindset, can we share this mindset? Can we make this like something that can grow, that people can feel beauty, play, and imagination as part of their way to deal with this whole changing world? Well, I'm a composer of music, and it's of course that I love to make music, to make things, but it's not so much that I can apply this in normal life, this artist mindset. That really takes a lot of exercise. And I feel that art should also break out of the fact that it's obsessed with status, obsessed with products, obsessed with results, and find a way to reinvent them, like how that artists can reinvent themselves as being an example of someone who is living an artist mindset. And I had been thinking of an example to share with you. And then I had to think of a moment when I was performing in Cyprus. And you know, Cyprus is a divided island. There is the Greek south and the Turkish north. And since the civil war, they're divided by a physical fence, mines, a buffer zone. And I like to show you a short video of a project that I did. And first I was in Cyprus to deliver a concert, but then I changed my mind. And I started talking with people and asking them, what does it mean? Can we reunite the island? Can we make peace? And I discovered they're allergic for this word, peace. And let me show you a few images of what happened after a lot of talking, a lot of imagination, a lot of listening actually to all the people there. Here is a picture of the buffer zone. You see the military barriers. There is guards everywhere. This is the buffer zone.
The most interesting illustration that I can offer of the division in this island is right over there between those 2 points. That is the ultimate metaphor. It is frozen in time since 1974. Shop fronts, a street that was thronged with people and no longer is.
So this is an empty space. Since the Civil War, like 40 years ago. And here's our performance. I put musicians on the rooftops.
I realized that I just should be open and listening to what's actually happened. And then I heard that even the things that went different from my plans actually worked out great. So then the whole project was no longer my composition or my plan, but it was really something that we shared with this whole community.
Green line by the riverside. Green line by the village. Green line in the middle of the town. Green line dividing lives and loves. A line that is black, not green. A line that should be erased, buried in history.
When that wall comes tumbling down, I want to see freedom sound. When that wall comes tumbling down, when that wall comes tumbling down.
I'm going to plant a tree.
Okay, this is a fragment of the whole movie, a film, and I'll post the link. But what you cannot see is that it was a 1-hour performance with a lot of music, but there was also moments that it didn't follow my plan, and there were silences, and musicians didn't see a sign or they didn't get a cue. And in this silence, that was actually the most beautiful moment, because all these people who were there, they were just listening to the place, to the sounds of the now and the here. And later they told me that was so impressive, because usually this place is full of tension, full of chaos, full of conflict. But to be there and to actually listen, it became full of opportunities or full of possibilities. And for me, this is already 15 years ago. But since then, I always thought that the most powerful thing that we all can do, and especially artists, is to create this type of space where the silence or the being there, listening, makes us open to see what's the possibility. And I think we really need that this time, where we will have to strive for another way of living. Good, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. Wow. So I just wanted to say to everyone so far this concludes the first act of performances. So I'd like to say, I'm sure on behalf of everyone, thank you very much to all of our presenters for being brave enough to speak on this and in this format. So you guys are what makes it, along with everyone who's in the chat. So thank you all for helping us pull this off. And it's been a really exhilarating first act. And like all great performances, there are 3 acts. So just to remind you all, there are 2 more acts coming. And for me, this is the end of my emceeing part. So I just wanted to take the time to say, personally, thank you all. It's been a very stressful couple of months for me personally, and so this is one of the events that taking part in organizing it was really important to me, and being here is really special. So this is one of my things that what matters now. So huge thank you all so far, because it's really special. So thank you. I'm just going to hand over now to Lauren and Sebastiaan, who are going to talk to you about the breakout rooms. And just to remind you all that when you move into breakout rooms in a minute, the YouTube we think will stay in the main room, so we're not quite sure what's going to happen to YouTube. Just to explain that, so you won't hear from me until the end now. So just want to say thank you all, stay safe, and thanks for being part of this community at a special time. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Zach. If you're interested in joining a breakout room discussion, please open up the participant window at the bottom of your Zoom screen and raise your blue virtual hand, and we will pop you into a breakout room. Thank you.
And for the rest of you who are staying in the main room, you are going to be able to enjoy Sebastiaan Terburg's music. He's our DJ for tonight, and it's a privilege to have you. And we're looking forward to listen to your music. Thank you, Sebastiaan.
Yep, 10-minute break, and feel free to get up and stretch around a little bit if you're not going to a breakout room.
Raindrops fall. Raindrops fall. The sun will shine. Raindrops fall. Change will come. The wind will speak. We cannot stop what we've begun. Sun
I'm really glad to have you back for the second act. My name is Larissa, and I'm really glad to be your MC for the next couple of minutes. The next block we are going to listen to is called New Dynamics. And I was just in the breakout session, and not just from the music Sebastiaan played, but also in the breakout sessions, I got a nice feeling for the kind of dynamics that people are actually feeling right now. We have been talking about access to sources that we did not have earlier, because the digital transformation that this crisis also bring with it kind of opened up gates that were closed before. So I'm really glad that we're having an amazing set of speakers now. We're going to introduce you to New Dynamics. This act is going to be about the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing protests against racism and police violence, who have urged us to act, to speak up against inequalities and injustice in our societies. And in these performances and talk, we will focus on the actions people are actually taking now in order to create the change we need. And so our 6 speakers and performers in this block are joining us from the US, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and Israel, and will introduce us to the dynamics that they experience in their communities and organizations. So have fun. And we'll kick off this act with Deb Lavoy joining us from McLean, Virginia, just outside of Washington, DC. So hi, Deb. A short introduction to Deb. Deb is a marketing strategist and executive who focuses on fake news and lies in marketing and social media. And in the last 4 years, she has been studying the technology, psychology, and rhetoric of disinformation and how to fight back. I'm really looking forward to Deb's talk on pushing back against disinformation by creating simple, memorable, competing ideas. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for having me and giving me a chance to focus down what I'm trying to say into 5 minutes. So I am a marketing strategist and technologist, and since very early in 2016, the last cycle of the presidential election, I have been obsessed more or less with these 3 questions. First, why are politicians so bad at explaining things? Second, why is disinformation taking over the world? And third, what am I going to do about it? So I went into my comfort zone. I did a ton of reading. I did a ton of research. I started building frameworks and theories. And the summary of 4 years of work is that disinformation is essentially marketing plus malice. And so this is a problem that I should be able to do something about. I can't solve world peace. I don't know enough about climate change. I don't know enough about racism and injustice, but I know something about marketing. But then I got stuck. Maybe some of you have experienced this yourself. Too many ideas, not quite enough confidence. I stayed stuck for a pretty long time. But the clock started ticking down faster and faster and faster. It's 116 days as of today to the next election. And we're at a point where it's now or never. So the only thing left to do is to simplify. And so this was my approach to simplification. I have all kinds of windows that are in the way of what I'm trying to say here. Disinformation in and of itself is something to study, but really what I wanted to look at is who is it affecting? It's affecting roughly 3 categories of people. The reality team, these are people a lot like you and me. We can usually tell truth from fiction. Nobody can tell always. The indoctrinated, these are the people who, the lies and conspiracy theories are affecting them. They believe pretty much anything Fox News says. And then there's a 3rd category of the confused. These are people, I think about my son who's in college now. They're not focused on the news and they don't really trust any source of information anymore. Whoops. So the reality team, we don't really have to worry about them. The indoctrinated, that's not a 120-day problem. That's a longer term problem. I can't help them. So let's focus on the confused. So why is disinformation so impactful on the confused? And it's because the information space looks like this. The disinformation presents itself in really bold, really simplistic terms. It's incredibly pervasive. It's everywhere. It's unavoidable. It's very, very repetitive. It sticks in your mind. Whereas the more reliable information requires more engagement. You need to read it more carefully. It's not always presented in such simple terms. They're not using the tools of rhetoric and marketing to push information in the same as successfully as disinformation. So our job is, in this very brief window of time, not to end disinformation or disrupt disinformation, although that would be nice, but to compete with it. So the job is to make real information as visible, simple, and memorable as the fake stuff. And then the confused will have a much more balanced understanding of what's going on in the world. They will have opportunities to turn to sources that resonate more with their general sense that, you know, things should be reality-based, things should make sense. So I got together with some friends, and we have formed what we're calling the reality team. And what we're doing is three things: explainers, talking points, and a network. Explainers take issues one at a time, issues that should perhaps be simple but have been complicated by disinformation. Should I wear a mask? We give them the bottom line up front, so within 3 seconds, people should have the key points. We get into the Q&A of it, the common questions we're seeing out in the world, and answering them in very plain language. And at the end, we show our work. So we show that the work is valid and reliable by showing all the references and places that we have retrieved this information from. Then we build talking points. Masks do work, and masks are patriotic. Masks are something you can do for your country right now. So we take these talking points and we refine them as we see how people are responding to them, and we push them out into the network. We are ramping up to try to get to publishing 3 topics per week and as much exposure as we can possibly get on these things. And this is reliant on the network that we are building. The network is building rapidly, but we have to accelerate it as much as possible to make it work. So we need some help. So if you're sitting around wondering what you can do in this next 3-month period, maybe you could help us out. We need people to do the research. We need writers. We need social media managers to help manage the various channels. Some better designers would be great, actually professional designers. We need people who are great at networking, and we are also looking for funding so that we can use not just organic growth, but also the engines of amplifications on the platforms. So if you are so inclined, you can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at realityteam11. You can contact me at deb@realityteam.org. And with any luck, we can give disinformation some competition in the next important time frame. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Deb, so much. That was an amazing talk, and I hope that you find some collaborators here in this crowd. So we're now going to take a leap across the ocean and are joined by Steve Slack in Manchester, UK. Hi, Steve. Steve is a heritage interpreter, and he's helping museums, galleries, historic sites, libraries, and other visitor attractions to make their history and meaning as relevant to people as possible. He's been a freelance interpretation consultant since 2009, and he's going to talk about a topic that has rightly been in the focus lately: controversial statues. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the platform to talk about interpretation, which I could talk about for hours, and the challenge we've all had to come down to talk about for 5 minutes has been felt by everyone, I think. So I thought I would talk a bit about statues. They've been in the news quite a lot recently. Take a walk around any town or city and you're likely to come across a statue, often the great and the good of the past, sometimes the not so good, looking down on us. And often they just have like a little plaque in front of them with a person's name or their dates. And not much context. For some statues, we look back at a person's time on Earth and we view it favourably, and some of them, increasingly, rather a lot of them, are not liked. And from our viewpoint today, I suppose we can interrogate not only what some of the people up there on the plinth did in the past, but also the decisions made by those who chose to put them up. And the debate around what we do with statues that we don't agree with isn't new. And for years, campaigners have been demanding that we remove some statues from public view. So what do we decide to do when we don't want to see them on our streets anymore? What are we supposed to do? I'm not the first person to ask that, and there have been many debates about it, the majority of which I can't cover in 5 minutes. But I think there are 4 main options open to us when it comes to looking at controversial statues. Option 1 would be to pull them down. And you know, statues certainly do get taken down, often during moments of political change, often by nation states and by new regimes who want to remove a part of history from a streetscape. Sometimes it's done by citizens, particularly when frustration and anger boil over, when people have had enough. And in Bristol, as we've heard already this evening, that statue of Edward Colston, who profited from the transatlantic slave trade, was recently toppled and even got thrown into the nearby harbour. But it doesn't just happen in the UK. It's Jefferson Davis, which would be known to many in the US. And the one at the bottom there is from Slovenia, where yesterday a statue of Melania Trump was burnt down. Now, removing a statue doesn't remove the history associated with it. You can take away the reminder, but that history is still there. What we can do, whether we take a statue down or not, is to change the narrative or to change its interpretation. And I believe that involves setting some of the more complicated characters in context. I was in my local park recently and I came across this statue of King Edward VII. His mother, Queen Victoria, reigned for ages, and as far as I can understand it, he spent most of his time waiting to be king, basically partying, eating, drinking, getting fat, messing about with quite a lot of other people's wives. He only reigned for 9 years before it all caught up with him. And so when I found him in the park, I thought, what are you doing here? You're not statue worthy, you didn't do anything great or good. And then I read the interpretation plaque that was positioned alongside. Yes, it acknowledged him as king, and it said why the statue was there and who'd paid for it. But it also described him as a socialite, as a glutton with an expansive waistline, and as a philanderer. And for me, that's a good piece of interpretation because it's honest, it's contextual. It took me from a place of questioning why he was even there to a place where I thought, okay, King Edward, up there on your pedestal, now I see your shortcomings have been acknowledged. Perhaps I'm a little happier for you to stay there. Your context is quite nicely set. And for me, that's the power of interpretation. And I'd like to suggest that contextual interpretation is an option available for those who aren't able or aren't willing to take a statue down. In some cases, however, a reinterpretation of a statue, no matter how good that interpretation is, simply won't do. And sometimes, quite rightly, they are forcibly removed by the people. But what happens to statues when they are down? Well, it seems that in Bristol, Edward Colston, having been fished out of the water, is now going to go on display in the City Museum. And the process of interpreting a statue like that is going to come under intense scrutiny. In a way, that's great news for the museum. The people are going to be queuing up to come and see this object that was what is on display. And we can be pretty sure, for once, that visitors are going to want to read the labels. And Thankfully, the museum has also collected protest placards to be part of the display because we all want the context. Option 4, do nothing. Well, of course, we could just leave the problematic statues where they are. We could put our heads in the sand and hope that the issue goes away, perhaps leave it for another generation, right? Well, no, wrong, of course not. Doing nothing is rarely the solution. When it comes to tackling racism or any other form of prejudice, historically or today, not taking action makes us complicit in the act. So it's important that we respond with statements and policy positions, yes, but also with real affirmative action. I believe that setting problematic statues in context can be a part of that action. If there's a statue or, hey, another piece of public art near you that you've got a problem with, do something about it. Not necessarily pull it down. It could be a small or a beautiful thing that you do, but tweet about it, talk about it, write to a politician about it, get dressed up as that character and go in first person and tell your community about their foibles. Edit the statue's wiki page. Get people together in your community and find consensus. Interpret it, contextualize it. Because if you can see a problem on your street, what matters now is that you know that you have the opportunity to reinterpret the story and to do something about it.
I can't even add as many clapping emojis as I want to. Thank you so much, Steve, for this presentation. I think you said exactly the right thing, like doing nothing is not an alternative right now. So we're now moving from the UK to the Netherlands, and with a warm welcome, I present to you our next speaker, Louis Bracamontes. Louis is an award-winning queer feminist poet based in Rotterdam, and in his works, he focuses on topics such as mental health, the queer experience, and safe spaces. He's also the founder of Unwanted Words, a platform for up-and-coming queer voices in spoken word and poetry, as well as the host of the Queer Poetry Nights. So we're now going to listen to his performance of his poem, The Power of the Word. The stage is yours, Louis.
Thank you so much, Larissa, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure being here and being part of this great initiative. Great job to everybody in the team of What Matters Now. And I'm really happy to follow the amazing insights of this of the performers and speakers in this blog. I think the curation adds up very well. I myself consider myself a spoken word artist. And very often people ask me, why poetry? Like, what's the deal with it? What's so special about spoken word? It's not like the world needs another poet. So I tell them, well, hold up, sweetheart, let's get it together because I'm about to drop all of this on you. You see, words can create, words can uplift, words can bring you down, words can get you canceled. Words can build a future. You may ask, what is the purpose of poetry? What is the power of the word? You forget words would give you power over nature, as language made it possible to speak to the gods. I tell you, poetry is kissing that power from above, from below, from within, kissing it and using the rhythm of the words to summon this deep, soft, smooth, warm fire you've come to call your voice. A voice that holds the magic to create a moment in space and time between you and I. No shame, no rush, no air. Everywhere you could feel all gone with the power of the word. A word that once said, I have a dream, and it resonated in the skins of 1 million Black histories and the many more to come. A word that once said, #MeToo, and it liberated women from their oppressors and their prisons of shame, disgust, and assault. A word that once said, Black lives matter, trans lives matter. A word that once said, nobody is free until every single one of us is free. Until refugees are safe. until queer kids are protected and seen. A poet harnesses the words to share that power and inspire the minds and hearts that want to break free. A poet creates a vision of a world that doesn't exist just yet, but it's about to begin. Thank you very much. And I would like to finish my segment by inviting everybody to take an intersectional stance to your everyday life. Existence, identity is not one-dimensional. We are race, we are gender, we are political groups, we are nationalities, we are multi-layer individuals. The problems cannot be addressed in a one-dimensional basis. So go around your day spreading kindness and trying to understand the multiple layers of identities of people around you and supporting oppressed groups, minorities, because a society is only as good as the policies that protect their most vulnerable communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louis. And yes to intersectionality. We're now moving from the Netherlands and traveling virtually to Jerusalem, Israel, and to Susan Hazan, who's today celebrating a birthday, so she can't join us live. So we'll watch her pre-recorded presentation. Susan is a dear colleague of mine, and she's a cultural heritage and museum professional, combining both academic research on the digital object with her work in the public cultural sector. She believes that digital resources not only sustain rich narratives, but enable them to fold into cultural heritage. However, they are also able to unwrap from the physical objects to open up new ways of self-directed learning and creative ways of thinking about the past and present. So Susan will be performing a presentation on Silence Matters. It is time to speak up, focusing on the actions to be taken now in the cultural heritage sector. Hi, Susan, or the representation of Susan.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the organisers inviting me to this very important moment to think about what matters now. And I want to share with you what matters to me, and I think that silence matters. So I just want to read out my personal statement. The cultural heritage sector has an institutional responsibility to foster inclusion, diversity, and good practice in the curatorship of multiple narratives to realise the potential of all communities. So I would say that keeping silent is not an option. We need to make our voices heard, and we all have a critical role to play in addressing systematic racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. So I'm sharing here tonight 10 ideas that I hope will help us think a way to reframe our thinking. So what's in a name? Thomas Jerusik, a member of the Kenai First Nations in Southern Alberta, graduated with an honours degree in political science and was the Students' Union's Indigenous Affairs Commissioner. And he led the campaign to drop the controversial name of the university's sports team, the Redmen. Perhaps this was the inspiration that focused the ongoing discussion that now reviews the famous Redskins Washington football team. Could it be the domino effect? Rethinking the curriculum. A group of sixth formers from London are campaigning to change the way British colonial history is taught on the national curriculum, and they all have family connections to the British Empire and feel that their past is not being taught properly in school history lessons. And one of the students said, "My parents had taught me stuff about my own heritage, so when I saw it being actively absent in the classroom, it made me feel like I was absent in history itself." New leadership. New Caledonian-born Emmanuel Carachot is the first Canuck to head the Quai Branly-Jacques Chirac Museum in Paris. Museums, he says, must find a way back for works that were looted during colonialism. And there's a whole historical work being done, he argues, on the collections in order to identify precisely the pieces that could possibly be the object of restitution, because they were taken in context of violence we cannot tolerate today. So return of sacred artifacts is critical. And a wonderful example is the Manchester Museum, who's now returning objects, sacred objects, stolen from Indigenous Australians nearly a century ago. Majubaja Jana from the Gandit Leader Group flew to the UK from Australia and described the ceremony as extremely emotional, spiritual and powerful, cathartic and healing, he added. They were taken from us, stolen from us, but it's important now that we're here to take them home. And this project marked the 250th anniversary of Captain Cook's first voyage to Australia. So refute institutional misconduct. And this is as much about people as it is objects. And here's an opportunity for you to sign the open letter to New York City's cultural institutions. And it starts, "We the people representing current and former Black and Brown employees, as well as other people of color and their allies, as a coalition from the various institutions in New York." Find this and sign it, because this is your opportunity to find your voice. Recognize the trophy cases of imperialism. While many US museums have made moves towards what the field calls diversity, equality, and inclusion, Mas Sanford called for much greater change. "It's critical we move past identity politics," she said. "It's not enough to hire an Indigenous curator. It's not enough to have one Black person on your board. Museums as we know them have to be abolished." I'm not sure if I agree with that, but at least she's starting the discussion. "I don't want my voice added to a museum that are often trophy cases for imperialism." And I've often thought that as I walk around the British Museum. And Mars Sakra is an artist, organizer, and educator. Bundles. The Glenfall bundles, which are not celebrated each year, such as those in museum collections, represent a break in the communication line, a break in the history, in this case of Nitsitchapi, and a break in the spiritual and ecological balance of their world. And I'm quoting here Glenbow Museum curator Gerald Connerty, the director of Indigenous Studies. "I became friends with the Weasel Moccasin family and began to understand the significance of holy bundles to people, not to a foreign culture. They in turn began to see me as an individual who was beginning to understand and respect their culture and their holy bundles. And they now asked that I fulfill some obligations to their culture. I was encouraged to prepare a daily smudge for the bundles while it resided in Glenbow, and I was expected at various ceremonies and requested more and more often to lend religious objects." Subvert. I'm sure you all remember the uncomfortable proximity, the website of the mongrel Tate. This is worth looking up. It's from 2000, and it's an amazing project about what goes on behind the scenes at the Tate. So my last comment is "speak out." And I'm quoting a statement from the Smithsonian Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch, and he's actually quoting Frederick Douglass: "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, but it must be a struggle." So I believe, number 10, your silence matters. Don't keep silent. Thank you.
Really great to hear that that we all have to act up and speak up, especially, and not just in the museum sector, which I feel kind of responsible for, but also in all other dimensions of our existences. Susan just sent us some greetings from her birthday party. So hi there, Susan. And we're now heading over to the next person. Next up on our virtual stage is Annemarie Naylor, joining us from the UK. Hi, Annemarie. Annemarie is the Director of Policy and Strategy at Future Care Capital, a national charity that uses the insight gathered through evidence-based research to advance ideas and that wants to shape future health and social care policy with better outcomes for society. She has a background in public policy, working with local, regional, and central government in the UK, and was awarded an MBE for services to community asset ownership in 2015. And we're now going to listen to her talk about honesty in uncertain times. And as always, you can turn to the chat for asking questions and interacting with her. Welcome, Annemarie.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for involving me in what's a terrific event this afternoon. So having been introduced so well, I will skip to my second slide and say that what matters now to me is honesty in uncertain times. And if I'm honest, I feel a little bit like Eeyore. And I have been for at least the last 6 months in repeatedly kind of trying to do the thing that I'm supposed to do, and facing kind of changes in the landscape that undermine or feel like they undermine sometimes a lot of the work that we've tried to do in good faith for the last 3 years. So I want to start by saying the ER, I hope, will change to something more positive by the end. This slide is really about saying to you that for me, the last 3 years has been about promoting trust and trustworthiness, predominantly in the use of health and care data, to try to improve outcomes for individuals, whether they may be from vulnerable groups and in need of regular care because they're elderly, because they're frail, or because they're unwell. And all of a sudden, with the pandemic, everybody, it seems, is faced with the prospect of becoming unwell. And worse than that, the prospect potentially of losing their life. And I don't think we've been honest and had a conversation about death. So in the UK instead, and around the world, this is the first data-driven pandemic. And so instead of talking about people, and instead of talking about life and death, it feels like we've been bombarded by waves of charts and flattening curves and diagrams and numbers and statistics, many of which, it has to be said, in terms of my day job, have been found wanting repeatedly. And the most recent in the United Kingdom example from the last week would be that we appear to have lost 2.4 million test results out of 10.5 million tests that we know we've undertaken, or at least issued. How are we going to get back, take back control using the data being led by the science or guided by the science if the numbers aren't reliable, if the numbers aren't there? It seems to me we need to be honest about this. We need though to also acknowledge that this is really difficult, that the science is new, the disease is new, the virus. There's so much we don't know that we're finding out day by day, and so numbers can't be perennially reliable and something that we can base our decisions upon. And yet we've tried, and in the process of that, what I think we've seen through Black Lives Matters and through other kind of highlighted inequalities in previous talks this afternoon is that difference has kind of been overlooked, or because at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a sense of level, it was a great leveler, that everybody was in the same boat and could be at equal risk. And what we know now is that that is absolutely not true. And to give voice to someone whose voice warrants hearing more than mine, in the last 6 weeks, I've had the privilege of working with the Health Foundation in the United Kingdom, engaging people who are in receipt of social care and who try to provide care services across the country. And in the context of those discussions, a gentleman, a wheelchair user, talked to us, and a political activist, and told us that he had suddenly received a food parcel in good faith on the part of the government from a supermarket, who must have received his details, his contact details, his address, and so forth, his preferences and requirements. He'd never consented, he'd never been asked. How do we make sure that what we do is not count numbers, put people on a list without them knowing and feeling uninvolved in the kind of process in which their, life critical matters there are caught up? We've consistently called for what we call data that cares, with that in mind. And I feel like recently that's absolutely what hasn't happened. So people will be aware we have lost a disproportionate number of people, very tragically, in receipt of care in residential care settings, as people have, I know, around the world, in the US, in Europe, and in Canada. And what we need going forward is a way that we can count people that doesn't do damage to the differences between them, to their life experiences, to their quality of life, that means it's worthwhile living in the first place. We need to understand and hear their experiences, and we need to have some way to capture that so that the science doesn't take over and do damage to what is, after all, life, and very messy and complicated. So what I'd like to say at the end is to say, we need some more of this, because it's been a long 6 months, and Tigger is my kind of mascot here, and we need courage. And if we can take heart in anything, it's that there has been appalling use of war rhetoric and the language of battling invisible enemies, which is all very masculine in my view, and unhelpful in so many regards. And I don't think what we need is more talk of war, but if there is one bit of positive to take from that, is that in all wars, invariably our ability to treat people from the point of view of developing our health services and our science always move on leaps and bounds. This is a brilliant opportunity for that to happen again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annemarie, for your inspiring talk. And I'd love to have some more of that courage that you just named in the last in your last slide. So to wrap up this second act called New Dynamics, we're actually going to indulge in some music freshly delivered from Virginia, USA by Scott Christopher Murray. Scott is a singer-songwriter living in the Shenandoah Valley, and he understands himself as a musician, artist, and activist. In his views, nowadays problems are deeply rooted in inequality and division. However, by connecting to people who want to be part of future solutions, we can solve them, and that's the world he wants to live in. So with a last really dynamic performance, Scott will be delivering a piece called Wade in the Water, a song of strength, and we're really glad to have him.
Good afternoon, I'm Scott Murray. I'm going to sing you a song we sing in church down here on the farm. Trouble the water, oh, see that man all dressed in red. God's gonna trouble the water. Looks like the man that Moses led. God's gonna trouble the water, oh, wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. Trouble the water, oh, see that man all dressed in white. God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, the leader looks like an Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water, oh, wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. Trouble the water, oh, God's gonna trouble the water, oh, God's gonna trouble the water.
That was so beautiful. Thank you, Scott. I know that you're here in the meeting somewhere. And that was already a wrap for our second act on New Dynamics, and I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Before we're heading over to the next act on Growing Together, we're taking another active break with Lauren and Sebastiaan. So once again, if you're interested in taking part in a breakout group discussion with our speakers, so please, you raise your virtual hand right now. You just go to the chat and then put up your little blue hand. And Lauren is going to go ahead and take you to the breakout room. If you don't want to go to the breakout room, but indulge in Sebastiaan's music, you can just stay here with us and be social on the chat. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and really looking forward to see you in the next act. And for the people watching this on YouTube, you're just gonna stay with us here in the main room. And Sebastiaan, I unfortunately don't hear your music.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks to Seb for the fantastic music. I was actually in the breakout room with everybody, and I realized that Steve and I are both wearing our Museums Are Not Neutral t-shirts. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that and to Mike Boreski's fantastic project for that. We've been hearing about how libraries are not neutral too, which has been really interesting. Anyway, welcome back. My name is Jane Finnis. I'm going to be your host for the final act this evening. I'm speaking to you from my home in Brighton on the south coast of England, and I'm really pleased to be here. The final act is called Growing Together, and if we want to create sustainable change, which we've been hearing a lot about this evening, and then we need to grow together, and we need to build resilient communities and create lasting effects. So the 6 speakers and performers that are in this final session are going to present how they've tackled the challenges on the basis of collaboration and community empowerment. So first up is Nancy, who's here with us. Nancy, I'm sure I'm saying your name wrong, Nancy, I apologize. Is it Wiltink?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Nancy Wiltink. She's an urban farmer focused on trying to change the food system to be more sustainable and a plant-based diet. She lives and works in Amsterdam, which is a really perfect city as it's got a lot of variety growing in the surrounding districts and great organic shops and markets. I think, Nancy, you came to urban farming after years of working in communication and theatres,
right.
and also as a writer and storyteller. And she's going to be talking to us about Soep from the North, which is a 1-year vegetable garden on top of the metro in Amsterdam, growing soup, vegetables and herbs for neighbourhood soup. So Nancy, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I look a bit scary because I've just been eating this. So I have a bit of green here, but sorry for that. Thank you. I was triggered by the question, what matters now? Because I think there's one thing that always matters much more than we realize, and that is food, the food that you eat every day. Whether it is you have the abundance of a city like Amsterdam that is sometimes called food paradise because there's so much, or whether you're living in a area where there is practically no food or no nice food. You can do so much by just eating or by the way that you're handling your food. So one day, well, actually it took many years, but okay, one day my neighbor asked me, he was living down the street and he said, will you join? I said, join what? He was going to go to a course, a 2-year, really intense course, 3 days a week, for urban farming. And he said, we have this nice patch of land just across our canal, right in the heart of Amsterdam, and they have built a metro there. And now it's time that we take that piece of land and a plot of 3,000 square meters, and we turn it into a vegetable garden. I thought it was a brilliant idea. It took us another 3 years before the city government gave us 1/3 of that patch of land, because that's how things go here in Amsterdam. It's never, yeah, good idea, we do that. But we did it. And then people started asking me why. We were working in communication and that wasn't that nice, and theater is so important, and isn't the arts the place to be? I said, yeah, sure it is for a lot of people, I think, but now with COVID, I see all these people sitting at home inside, frustrated, and actually what are they creating is words or papers, which are no longer papers because they're all in a computer, so more words, but then digital, whereas we really grow something and then you can eat it, and it matters so much what you do, what you eat. So for example, from my fridge this morning, I took this Almhof yogurt. I love Almhof yogurt. I don't think there's anything wrong with people eating it, but it is a bit of a complicated product if you look at the whole food system, because this little pot of yogurt, it comes from about, I think, 30 countries. I mean, the milk comes from one country, but then the food that the cows are eating comes from Brazil, probably. We are now having a big debate in the Netherlands with angry farmers that they want to keep on to that habit of feeding our cows with food from abroad. And then it goes to a factory that has to be built. And then the nectarines I see, they were probably grown, who knows where, France, I hope. And then there's passion fruit, probably from Egypt, that all came together in a factory after it was processed in different factories until it was, as they say, into a sort of concentrate juice. Then there was sugar, so they needed some sugar beets coming in and make the sugar. Then the pot itself is made probably from oil coming from Arabia or Texas, who knows. Then there's this aluminium lid coming from Suriname, might be. And then all the paint and printing on it, it's endless, you know. One little pot of yogurt comes from everywhere. And whereas from the garden, we just put in some seeds and we have this beautiful teeth green making rucola. And that's such a mind-blowing difference that a lot of people don't realize that it is such a choice whether you eat this or whether you eat this. And of course you cannot eat rucola on a daily basis and eat nothing else. But a lot of people don't even think about it. So first, my life was like this, nice, sweet and creamy and a little exotic in theater. And now it's a little bit more like this, fresh and tasty and crunchy and difficult at times. But it's a shift for me to what matters and to consider the whole food system and how maybe my little garden and the talks I have with the people working and volunteering in the garden about, whoa, I never knew how onions grew. I never imagined that this is what it looks like if they're really in the soil. And whereas everybody knows what a hamburger looks like because McDonald's is throwing it into your face everywhere, nobody knows what it looks like when an onion is grown. So I was very happy and fortunate that when Corona hit, we were outside working in the garden. There was not much difference. I know a lot of people that were not so fortunate, although I don't earn so much money. It's our third year of our education, we call it, because we still have to find a way to earn money with it. But it reminds me of what someone said. They say it's a chief, but I don't think that's really true. An Indian chief. He said only when the last tree is cut and the last river polluted and the last fish from that river is caught, that you realize that you can't eat project plans. Well, no, the actual text is you can't eat money. But you can't eat project plans either, you know. So the first speaker who said, do something, act, go out, I think he is so right. And although I have no idea what this will, how this will end, and if we're ever going to be real farmers making money growing rucola. I love my rucola and onions and everything else that's grown there. I think what matters is, as what was his name again, first speaker? I think Phil. He said, do something, make it happen, change the system bit by bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's so interesting how this current situation has really brought a focus onto the local, but also onto the global as well, and getting you to question where the value is and where the opportunities are for both. And it was really great to hear about your project. Thank you. So our next speaker is from Gothenburg in Sweden. Her name is Netha Hussain. She's a medical doctor and researcher. She's been active in Wikipedia for more than 10 years. But she also writes articles around medicine and healthcare. But in real life, I think you're a physician and a researcher, and your research is around virtual reality and the assessment of post-stroke impairment. Is that right? I think that's what your Wikipedia page says anyway. So in recent months, your focus of your writing has inevitably been on COVID-19, and you're going to be talking to us about the role that why Wikipedia matters in the current pandemic. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. So I will be talking about why Wikipedia matters during the COVID-19 pandemic. So Wikipedia is the world's largest encyclopedia. The goal of Wikipedia is to become the essential infrastructure in the ecosystem of free knowledge. Wikipedia has always responded to crises happening around the world by sharing free knowledge. This has been made possible by dedicated volunteers who work tirelessly for adding and updating content on Wikipedia. So here is how Wikipedia is responding to the COVID-19 crisis. It was on 31st December 2019 that suspicions about a cluster of previously unknown pneumonia cases were reported from China. Just 5 days after the disease was detected, the English Wikipedia article about COVID-19 first appeared. Since then, the article has undergone major expansion, and now it gives a comprehensive overview of the COVID-19 pandemic. The article has been edited by over 2,800 editors, including people like me, other medical doctors, and researchers. The article about the COVID-19 pandemic on the English language Wikipedia has now been viewed over 50 million times. And the same article is now present in 131 language editions of Wikipedia. So now you can read about the COVID-19 pandemic in Russian, Malayalam, Swedish, Telugu, or several other languages of the world. Wikipedia matters during the COVID-19 pandemic because it has a wealth of information, it gathers a huge viewership, and because it has many language editions. And therefore, it becomes important that updated and reliable information appears on Wikipedia. One of the main problems that many countries are facing today is misinformation. Misinformation has become so rampant in the context of COVID-19 that the World Health Organization called it an infodemic. Misinformation could be in the form of conspiracy theories, fake drugs, or even prevention methods that don't really work. So there is a Wikipedia article that lists all the fake medicines against COVID-19. There is a longer Wikipedia article for listing all kinds of misinformation related to COVID-19. Wikipedia even has an article about xenophobia and racism in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Wikipedia has articles about overarching topics such as human rights issues during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also about very specific topics such as impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on abortion in the United States. So there is a Wikipedia article about the COVID-19 pandemic situation for every country in the world, including Antarctica. And by now, there are over 2,500 articles on Wikipedia surrounding the theme of COVID-19. Wikipedia matters now more than ever due to the changing nature of information surrounding the pandemic. Traditional encyclopedias are not able to collect, curate, analyze, and present data in such a fast pace as Wikipedia does. So more and more people are turning to Wikipedia for gathering new information related to COVID-19. And therefore, it becomes very important that the articles on Wikipedia are updated and reliable. If you ask Amazon's Alexa or Apple's Siri about COVID-19, they give you information by looking up Wikipedia. So it's time that we realize the importance of sharing free knowledge and making sure that Wikipedia is reliable and updated. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Netha. I'm a huge Wikipedian fan. I think that there's been so much fantastic partnership work done with them by so many different sectors, and what you're doing is really feels really important right at the moment. So we're going back to the Netherlands. We've got Erik Boekesteijn to talk to us. Erik referred to himself today on Twitter as a library pirate, which I really liked. But he is also senior advisor at the National Library of the Netherlands. He's a musician and an author and one of the library world's movers and shakers. So Erik, you're going to read your poem Crashing on the Edge, I believe, which you wrote for your band Huntsman Apology. Yep.
Yes, correct.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thanks to Jasper and Michael, my dear friends, and the rest of the whole team for organizing this. I feel humble among this great group of speakers, and I'm already truly inspired by everyone and everything that I hear. I could talk hours about libraries and being neutral or not, but tonight, this evening, I'm going to read a poem, because besides being a a global traveler in search of better libraries. I write children's books, and I'm a singer in a band. One of the slides that you see behind me that I wanted to show as we talk about what matters now is from my beloved story house in Chester, a library that I helped to create. Slide a little bit. What you see on the back of the wall is, I am not defined by my scars, but by my incredible ability to heal. And this is taken in Children's Hospital Week in the UK, and they bring all the children for a week into the library. It's a theater, a library, and a cinema. And they celebrate these children's stories. And I think this saying also goes for our world today. So I think they change all the lyrics around the walls every now and then, and they're all beautiful always. So back to the poem. The poem that I want to share with you is one of hope, which most of my poems are not. But this is called Crashing on the Edge. Paradise seems so small now, and it's getting smaller still. Soon we'll have to wear our sins and hide our shame. The lambs have been butchered. The crosses are burned. This time the smoke will not reach heaven. It will not reach heaven. And you talk about love and the things worth fighting for. The way to go and what you want me to reach for. But I remember walking on those empty shores, waves crashing on the edge of the world. In words, there was music. In silence, understanding. In need, there was no suffering. And in love, there was no depending. That's where I will find you again, on the edge of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Erik. That was really beautiful. So we're staying on the with library champions, and our next speaker is Sherlonya Turner, who's worked in public libraries for over 18 years and is currently the Associate Director at the Ann Arbor District Library in Michigan, USA. She enjoys talking on large projects, both professionally and personally, and describes herself on her blog as someone who cooks a lot, sews a little, and is trying to savor her son's childhood. She says she's prone to eavesdropping, but she recycles, putting all those extra words into new stories. I love that quote. So she's going to be performing Closed Doors, Open Opportunities. Sherlonya.
Thank you. Let me just get this slide up. All right, so here we go. Like so many other people, we found ourselves at the public library facing the fact that we were going to have to close our doors, which is something that that's the opposite of what we do, right? We always want to have the most open doors possible. We're used to thousands of people coming through our doors all of the time. And this guy here, what's he doing here? Warren Harding, he's the guy who popularized the word normalcy. And normalcy is a thing that we decided that we wanted to bring to our library patrons, even though they wouldn't be able to come through our doors like usual. Enter AADL TV. That is our YouTube channel. We owned the URL aadl.tv, and that's where this name came from. And we decided that what we were going to do is bring programs and other interesting things to our patrons when they could not walk through our doors. What you see here right now is our day one of AADL TV that happened just a few days after we realized that we needed to close. And this was in March when our students were about to have a spring break. And so we knew that parents were expecting this time with their kids at home, and they expect activities from us, which we usually deliver. So what you'll notice is that we had story time, a hands-on activity, and then our bummer game, which is a spinoff of a summer game activity that we do every summer. So story time. For our youngest users, they are used to coming to the library every day. For their parents, they are used to bringing their kids to the library all of the time. And we knew that this was the first thing that was going to be super important to a lot of our audience. So that was the first thing that we made sure that we offered. I am very proud to say that we learned through the grapevine. By grapevine, I mean internet, that our story times allowed at least one pair of parents to have a little bit of personal time in their lives. And if we can provide that, that is meeting our goal to provide some normalcy. These are just some little clips from some other things that we provided. At first, we were so much thinking about the pandemic itself, and a lot of our programs represented that and mentioned that directly. But we also wanted to make sure that people didn't lose the other thing that they're used to from their library, that gathering space. And so we knew that we weren't going to be able to provide that in the way that people are used to, but we were going to be able to take things that people were missing and turn them into our own events. For example, when the big basketball tournament couldn't happen, we did Dungeons and Dragons bracket so people could get that competition going. We also had a number of meetups that we never would have been able to have in normal times. This was our dog meetup. We can't bring a bunch of dogs into the library, but we were able in this different time to bring dogs and their owners together. And we knew that our patrons would be missing their sports. And so one of our staff members put together a simulated league so that people could get that sports fix. They could get that touch of something that they would have had otherwise. This is Toby. He was our sportscaster and the mastermind behind this. So one of the things that happened is that as we were thinking about the different ways to try to provide a touch of what people were used to at the public library, it was mutating a little bit, right? Like we were looking at how is YouTube different than programming in the public space? And then we were stretching and growing and shaping ourselves to this new way of doing things. And that's where the Saturday show was born. And the Saturday show is a variety show. I'll just show you some images from it. That's intended for children, but really it took from all of the strings of the normalcy that we tried to create during this time, and it is its own thing. And it's these ways of producing and thinking and collaborating that we will take with us as we move into the future that will never be the same as the world that we left before. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sherlonya. You're getting so much love in the chat for the dogs in libraries. That's brilliant. So next up, number 5 in our series, we're almost at the end now, is Arnie Garvey, who is CEO of Rewild Earth in Zinda in Niger. So Arnie started to research perennial plants in a 225mm rainfall zone in Niger in 1986. And he developed a method called wild perennial polyculture that forms the basis of a sustainable economy, providing income to the rural population whilst restoring the environment. So right now he is out with his team in their field station directing seeding, because that's the time of year where they're at. So he has kindly recorded a video for us to talk about his work, and the title of his talk is Making the World Bountiful and Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Arnie Garvey, and today I would like to present to you Making the World Bountiful and Beautiful, which is wild perennial polyculture in action. The rainy season has finally arrived in the Sahel region in West Africa, and I'm sitting in Zinder in the middle of Niger. People here are now very busy sowing both millet and sorghum, but some of us are direct seeding instead. This year, we are testing 128 native wild perennial species through the direct seeding test. What is very different with the perennial species in contrast to annuals like sorghum and millet is that they give food all year round. This leads to food security so that if one crop fails, then after a month, you can have another crop. It also leads to distribution of your workforce, which is your family basically, so that you have something to do the whole year round instead of just working through the 3-month annual growing season. As a 20-year-old, I was on my first Trans-Sahara traveling from London to Accra, when I came upon a dried up melon in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And I thought to myself, imagine if this could become human food, what it would mean for the people here. In 1983, I came across an article written by Norman Myers, where he states that there are 75,000 edible species in the world, yet human beings get 90% of their food from only 20 of them. He also mentioned that many of them could grow in dry zones without irrigation. This potential really hit me and has been with me ever since. This brought me to Niger, where I started my direct seeding research in 1986. And if you look at the top of this picture, that is what the field station looked like when I started, in a 225 millimeter rainfall zone. And the bottom part of the picture is how it looked some years later. Seeds of trees and bushes and perennial herbs were sown directly in the ground, and on top of that, we had the bonus of natural regeneration. Didn't water any plant, it was only rainfall, no fertilizer, pesticide, etc. As soon as we had results, we transferred the information to the rural communities, and we taught them how to direct seed and how to use these plants. The wild perennial crops were the domain of the women. The men owned the field, but the women could own the crops, and in that way they got their own economy going as these trees grew and gave fruits. Most of these plants had been stigmatized as famine food and looked down upon, so one of the jobs were to get people to appreciate them and to heighten their status and show their uses and what good products one could make from them. You have so many other uses for wild perennials. The crafts, which is like an industry here, you have cosmetics, and you have medicine. The wild perennial crops actually leads to a WPC economy that is worldwide. There are an abundance of species on every continent, and when we harvest these crops non-destructively, then humans benefit from nature, and nature benefits from humans.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Arnie. I know he's actually trying to join us. I think as we're speaking now, he's trying to get in, but he's obviously having some connection difficulties. One of the privileges of being part of this event is actually listening to all the talks and learning so much from all of you. So it's fantastic. Thank you. We're almost at the end. This is our last performance. And I first met one of the members of the musical trio who we're going to be listening to at a digital culture conference in Taiwan a couple of years ago. We were introduced by a mutual friend of ours who's sadly no longer with us. But he was one of those really beautiful people that is a hub for so many creative initiatives globally, and we really miss him. His name was Ilya, and he introduced me to Sheng-wen, or Jonathan, to use his English name. And Jonathan stood and sang to us as a group of speakers for the conference at a traditional tea room in Taichung, where he lives. So I'm really pleased that he's able to sing for you this evening. This time he's going to be singing with his group that are called Mysterium Musicum, which is comprised of himself, Zhong Xuanyang, who's doing improvised chanting, Zhong Chiu-fang, who is baritone, and Liu Sheng-wen on cello. Now, before we play the video, Jonathan's asked us to draw attention to some concerns that he and his colleagues have around the use of Zoom. And the team at What Matters Now wanted to share those with you, because I don't know if you've followed what's happening, but there have been some recent suspension of a number of Zoom accounts that were held by activists in Hong Kong as a result of the Chinese government putting pressure onto Zoom. I think that a lot of those accounts have been reinstated now, but it feels very important to us to acknowledge that the concerns that Jonathan and his colleagues have about Zoom, but also to acknowledge the really deeply problematic nature of many of all the big technology platforms that we're all using, and to sort of stand in solidarity with anyone who is standing up to the kind of human rights violations that they've been doing against Zoom, or campaigning for an internet that's driven by social values and openness. So I'd like to leave you with a quote from Jonathan's own words. Taiwan has been in a peculiar and dangerous political situation, even more so during a time of COVID-19, yet we can still help. Through improvised chanting, we wish to send prayers to the people who are currently suffering all around the world. So here is the Mysterium Musicum Ensemble, who are performing a piece called Blessings from a Small Island.
Hi, we are 3 musicians from Taiwan. During this difficult time, we would like to send our love to you through our music.
Lord.
这是来自台湾的祝福，愿你们平安。
That's such a beautiful way to end a fantastic evening of performances. Thank you so much to all of the speakers tonight. You've all been really wonderful. I've enjoyed it so much personally. Thank you to all of the people who are listening. Thank you to anyone who's watching on YouTube. The formal part of tonight is over. What we've decided to do is stay here for a little bit longer and do a little bit of informal Q&A, answer any questions, let people talk to each other, and I'm happy to facilitate that. So those of you that wish to say goodbye, thank you much for coming. Good evening and good night. And for those of you that wish to stay, please hang around and we'll do a little Q&A and have a chat.
Well, that was so amazing.